So, deep inside CIA headquarters, there's this plaque, right? It's dedicated to one of their greatest heroes ever. But here's the thing, this hero is probably the last person you'd ever expect. The words on it are just huge. It says he saved the world from nuclear war and changed the course of history. I mean, wow. So you're thinking, okay, this has got to be some all-American hero, right? A die-hard patriot? Well, you'd be totally wrong. Get this. The man they're honoring was actually a top-ranking general in Soviet military intelligence. Yeah, one of their guys, an absolute insider. So how on earth does an enemy general end up as the CIA's greatest hero? Well, the answer is all tangled up in the very weird, very secret war that he was fighting. Let's talk about that war, a war of secrets. They called it the Cold War, but honestly, it was anything but cold. This was a massive global showdown that basically defined the entire second half of the 20th century. And it wasn't a battle fought on fields with tanks. Nope. This one was fought in the shadows. Think about it. A normal war, a hot war, is pretty simple, right? You've got tanks, planes, soldiers, and eventually a clear winner. But the Cold War, totally different beast. This was a war of whispers, of secrets, of propaganda. The real fight was for information. And that meant your most important soldiers, they weren't driving tanks. They were spies. And you know, hanging over all of this was the bomb, the constant, terrifying threat of nuclear war. Both the US and the Soviet Union had enough firepower to literally end human civilization, like multiple times over. It created this insane situation they called a balance of terror. The whole world was walking on a razor's edge, where just one mistake, one piece of bad intel could have meant the end of everything. So, what was this all about? At its core, this wasn't just two countries butting heads. It was a clash of two completely different worlds, two opposite ideas for how society should even exist. You had Team USA and capitalism on one side, all about economic freedom, private property, competition. Then you had the USSR and communism on the other, where the state owned everything, all in the name of equality. So this wasn't just some squabble over a piece of land. No, this was a fight for the soul of the planet, for the future of humanity. Okay, so in this massive war of secrets, what's the most powerful weapon you can have? Information. Pure and simple. And there was one man, one guy, sitting right at the heart of the Soviet military machine, and he knew everything. His name was Dmitry Polyakov, and on paper, he was the perfect Soviet. I mean, this guy was a decorated World War II hero. He climbed the ranks to become a general in the GRU. That's the Soviets' top military intelligence agency. He didn't just follow the rules of spycraft. He wrote them, inventing all kinds of new techniques. He was so good, he only trained the absolute best of the best, including, believe it or not, a young agent named Vladimir Putin. So yeah, this guy had it all. Power, respect, the complete trust of the Soviet government. He was the system. Or so it seemed. Because behind that decorated uniform and all those medals, Polyakov was hiding an unbelievable secret. For over 20 years, think about that, 2 decades, while he was teaching Putin and designing Soviet spy strategies, General Dmitry Polyakov was also the CIA's most important spy, their #1 guy. They had a name for him, the crown jewel. And that right there is the million-dollar question, isn't it? This is the ultimate betrayal. Why? Why would a man who would climb to the absolute top of the Soviet mountain decide to risk it all, to burn everything down? Well, let's get one thing out of the way right now. It wasn't about the money. He wasn't for sale. Even the Soviets who caught him admitted he did it for ideas, not for cash. So if it wasn't money, what was it? Okay, so there are basically 3 big theories. The first one, he just got fed up. He saw the corruption, the hypocrisy at the top of the Communist Party, and it made him sick. The second theory is way more personal, and it's heartbreaking. His son was critically ill, and the Soviet government apparently refused to let him get life-saving treatment abroad, and the boy died. Talk about a motive for revenge. And then there's a third idea, a much more complicated one, that Polyakov saw himself as a balance. He thought that by carefully feeding info to the Americans, he could keep both superpowers from making a fatal mistake and accidentally starting World War III. And for 20 solid years, the man was a fire hose of top-tier secrets. He told the US that the Soviet Union and China were about to have a massive falling out, which completely changed the game of global politics. His intel was critical for Kennedy during the Cuban Missile Crisis. He blew the lid on countless Soviet spy networks in the West and handed over the blueprints for their most advanced military tech. Look, to be a double agent at that level for that long, it's almost impossible. It's the kind of thing you only see in movies. But in the real world of espionage, nobody gets away forever. Eventually, the shadows always catch up with you. And after all that, after 2 decades of outsmarting the entire KGB, his downfall wasn't some brilliant master plan. It was just dumb luck, a complete fluke. Soviet agents were looking into a totally different case, and they found a single fingerprint on some spy gear. And whose fingerprint was it? Dmitry Polyakov's. Just like that, the walls started closing in. So they call him back to Moscow. They tell him, "General, we need you to lead a training session for our best young officers." He walks in, ready to teach, and right in the middle of it, the door opens, 4 KGB agents walk in, and they arrest him on the spot. And here's the kicker. The detail that sounds like it's straight out of a Hollywood script. One of the agents cuffing him was his old student, Vladimir Putin. After they interrogated him for years, Dmitry Polyakov was executed for treason in 1988. But before they did, his supposed last words were this chilling, defiant prediction. He apparently looked right at his executioners and just said, "The Soviets are doomed." And how long did it take for his prediction to come true? Just 3 years. 3 years later, the Soviet Union was gone. So that brings us to his legacy. How do you even begin to understand a guy like this? I mean, his actions quite possibly stopped a nuclear war and helped end the Cold War. But depending on who you ask, his story is seen in 2 totally, completely different ways. To the CIA and the United States, he's a hero. Simple as that. He's the crown jewel, the man who saved the world. But in Russia, he's the worst traitor in their history, a monster. In fact, to this day, when Vladimir Putin wants to really, truly insult someone in his government, his go-to line is to call them a traitor, like the filth of Dmitry Polyakov. And that leaves us with this huge question, doesn't it? Polyakov's story is proof that, yeah, one single person working from the shadows really can change the entire world. But what does that make him? Can you be a hero and a traitor at the same time? Is the man who betrays his own country to save the world a good guy or a bad guy? That's something history is still trying to figure out.